So the fact that they're there, the fact that it's happening is potentially the biggest threat to this London-based financier elite in a very, very long time. You have to go back to a period when American economic policies were starting to proliferate around the world, in Japan, in China, in Germany, in Russia, in France, and so on. And the central banking system run by the British said, no, we can't have that. We can't have economically strong sovereign nations because they're going to gang up and they're going to shut down the empire. Frankly, the two key countries to start to bust that up, given their current leadership, is the United States and Russia.
Like Jerome Powell is a hero, how he destroyed the Eurodollar system. Powell raising interest rates the way he did and prosecuting monetary policy the way he did post-COVID to shrink the Fed's balance sheet and to drain the offshore dollar system was to drain the leverage out of it to set the table for when Trump could come to power and change the entire system.
When tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes a duty. So said Thomas Jefferson. Go to bit.ly/lawful tax protest or bit.ly/make war history and find out why it is a criminal offence to pay central government or local government taxes in the UK. bit.ly/lawful tax protest or bit.ly/make war history. And let's make war history. You're in the UK, actually anywhere, get a VPN. If you want to be able to access all sorts of perspectives that the government thinks are dangerous for you, get a VPN. nordvpn.com/cryptorich. Hey Tom, hey Susan, thank you so much for making yourselves available. This is a world exclusive. Susan Kokinda from Promethean Pack meets Tom Luongo from Gold, Guts and Guns. Susan, do you want to give a brief intro? Because you've been on my channel before and I've held all the links in the description below, and then we'll go to you, Tom.
Sure. I'll just say I'm a 54-year veteran as of today of this political fight because I joined the movement founded by Lyndon LaRouche the day that Nixon pulled the plug on the gold standard and the standard and the Bretton Woods system. I've been following LaRouche, and when Nixon did that on August 15th, 1971, I said, I think this guy knows what he's talking about because he had warned of it. And I said, I think I'll stick around and figure out what this is all about. And here I am 54 years later. So, you know, I've been on the political front lines, fighting what people now call the deep state or globalists, what we call the modern day British Empire, and very happily jumped on the Trump bandwagon when we saw somebody who actually had the intention, the courage, and the power to take these forces on.
Very good.
Yeah, that's it.
Tom.
I'm Tom Luongo, Gold, Ghosts and Guns. I fell into this whole version of reality slowly but surely over the course of time. And what do? We do the intersection of geopolitics and markets. That's what we do. And when you do that, eventually, if you're honest with yourself, you figure out that, like all roads lead to London and or Amsterdam and or Luxembourg, and it's all really the same thing. I like to call them the Davos crowd. I think, honestly, that's been my meme, and I think it's everywhere now, and it's mine, and but that's the gig. But we fell into it, and it's just a long-term conversation that I've been having with Rich and Alex Craner, and when you start to see the world from that perspective, it's hard, to argue. It's hard to unsee it that way. And then the fun part about it is that you're over the target when all of a sudden every freaking cheap maple syrup swilling Canadian who's getting paid $15 an hour to roast you on Twitter, is coming out of the woodwork, to defend the British. I'm like, I wonder where that, it's like, that's it. And it's just that. And myself and my partner, Dexter White, are, we're just miserable, cynical Gen Xers who have a particular knack for figuring out where the zeitgeist is going. And because we always have, and we've been doing it for about 40, and we have been doing it ourselves for 40 years. Interestingly enough, it's funny that you mentioned that it's 54 years to the day since Nixon closed the gold window. Closed the gold window. I have to wonder if Trump and Putin, that's not symbolic about today.
Oh. Yeah, we thought the same thing.
It's funny. I've been I forgot all about August 15th, right? I mean, honestly, as a day, I'm more looking forward to the anniversary of John McCain's brain tumor reaching up and giving its life for our country. But because the older I get, the less I'm interested. I mean, the ending of the gold of the Bretton Woods era, it was both traumatic, and the older I get, and the more I study this stuff, and the more I look at the way Trump and to be honest with you, and I think this is where you and I are going to disagree a little bit. What I've seen from Jerome Powell over the last 4 years, has been in some ways, the Eurodollar system was already growing so far out of control at that point that there was no.
Okay,
You had to protect. You had to protect the gold. That's where I.
Hold on a second, Tom. We are going to come to that, right? We are going to come to that. We're
Yeah.
recording this on Friday, the 15th of August at. It's now 20 to 8 p.m. UK time, and I think in a couple of hours' time or something, or Trump and Putin are they're going to begin their meetings around about now in
I was
Alaska.
about 2 o'clock, I thought. Yeah.
Yeah. But the other thing, the date I just checked up, August the 16th is the anniversary of Elvis's death. So it may be that they're meeting to span that as well.
Nice.
You got to be willing to look at all sorts of angles, right?
Well, I mean, it's all about return of America, and
Of course,
in that respect.
of course.
So that's the way you have to look at it.
Rock and roll presidents, right? Okay. Now,
It's the WWE president, obviously, but yeah.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So, and I am a keen an eager student of both of you. So grateful that both of you have made this work to be available. And let's start with the Trump-Putin meeting. And I'm going to go to you, Susan. And then I'm going to ask both of you if you can keep your answers sort of short so we can have a lot of back and forth. But hey-ho, we'll see. Susan, what's the deal?
The first thing is that it's happening. Despite everything that the British tried to do, people probably saw the Russian Ministry of Defense had been warning about Ukrainian false flag operations in the days leading up to it, anything to sabotage this. So the fact that they're there, the fact that it's happening is potentially the biggest threat to this London-based financier elite in a very, very long time. Because frankly, if you have to look at it historically, you have to literally go back to the 19th century. You have to go back to a period when American economic policies were starting to proliferate around the world, in Japan, in China, in Germany, in Russia, in France, and so on. And the central banking system run by the British said, no, we can't have that. We can't have economically strong sovereign nations because they're going to gang up and they're going to shut down the empire. And pretty much every war we've had has been about that, as has been the entire geopolitical doctrine of let's you and him fight. And of course, the fight between the United States and the Soviet Union was part of that. Thanks to the death of Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill coming here and declaring that the Soviets, who had been our allies, were our enemies. And then the entire post-war period of geopolitics, nations played against each other so that the global financier elite could sit on top. Frankly, the two key countries to start to bust that up, given their current leadership, is the United States and Russia. So the fact that this thing is happening is incredible. The other two countries we hope to see come into this process, but I think Russia and the United States have to start it, is India and China. Recognizing the economic fights that are going on, there's a bigger question, which is, are we going to get what Trump has talked about, a world of sovereign nations? So I'm not going to prognosticate in terms of land swaps or anything, or how successful this is going to be. Anybody who does that is an idiot in my book, because you've got two geniuses talking to each other and they're going to be calling the shots. So, but I think from that historical standpoint, it is so big.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. I from the moment that this thing was announced, I'm like, look, the meeting itself is the win. And then everything else after that. I mean, I think they're both very smart men. And I also happen to think that the best way to analyze the way they're going to approach each other is as mob bosses. I think that's really the best way to look at it. I call him Don Trump-Leone. It's clear that Putin runs Russia in that particular way, and he has to. And the problem for Trump is that the Americans haven't been run that way. They've been run by as a kind of James Burnham style managerial state with puppeteers from across the pond, be they English or British. Never say English versus British or Dutch or French or Italian or whatever, and there's all of that old system that exists within the American the power structure, which is clearly now breaking off into its own fiefdoms, right? The fact that this meeting is happening at all is really all that matters. I look at who's showing up, who's there on both sides. This is not just Trump and Putin meeting for to exchange a soccer ball and get to know each other. Lavrov is there, Besant is there, Silyanov is there, everybody is there. This is a big Marco Rubio is there. This is a big deal. This is a meeting that supposedly came together really quickly, but I'm sorry, no, it did not. Both sides have been using human intelligence to get their messages back and forth across the new Iron Curtain for over a year now. I mean, it's past July. So, I mean, like Trump was sending people over there. Like Viktor Orban's world tour last year was clearly, a fact-finding mission and to give everybody what was happening. So, no, it's a momentous thing. It truly is. And we should just, temper our expectations. The mob bosses are going to break bread. They're going to get to know each other. They're going to lay out their terms. And I think, honestly, they're going to have already carved up the world. The question is whether the mob bosses over in Europe are going to try and, I don't know, start World War III for reals, And we saw that today with a huge drone strike on Russia from the Ukrainians. But then again, like the Russians are pushing through at Kramatorsk. I think it's around Kramatorsk, like 17 kilometers. They just, they haven't blitzkrieged a line like that since February, March of 2022. So, things are breaking open. And, that's always a good sign as well, that because when there's stalemates, no matter how you look at them, and I look at it from the geopolitical, but also from the financial perspective, like the way they cap gold, the way they cap bond yields, the way they cap currency rates and all this stuff, you can see that these are all, in effect, capping actions. They're delaying actions because the goal in Brussels and London is clearly just wait Trump out, undercut him, and then, put their puppet back in control. And we'll see how successful they'll be. We need to talk about redistricting because I think that's the angle that they're going for right now.
Right. Now, you've both, forgive me for what I'm about to say. Okay.
Sure.
I've got to play devil's advocate. You've both spoken glowingly about these mob bosses. They're smart and, they've worked this all out. But Putin's this cold-blooded, evil, dictatorial killer. And Trump is this narcissistic oaf who just sends mean tweets. I mean, seriously?
Projection is a really dangerous drug. And I have to, you work in child protective services, I'm sorry, but I was going to say, Alinsky rules for radicals is like, is their operating handbook.
Yeah.
So,
but that's the way the media portray it. They're losing their hair over this. And I have to deal with my fabulous, wonderful cousins, some of whom live in the US, and tell me all of this, right? And then I've been saying in some of my videos, Muhammad Ali and his first fight against Sonny Liston. Muhammad Ali played like he was crazy, absolutely crazy, completely disarmed Sonny Liston.
And I'll say this: one of the things about losing all your hair is it's very liberating because you no longer can set it on fire. And it's very easy to become not gaslit by morons, and that's literally. And this is the worst part. This is the worst part about all this, right? Is that the people that these. No offense, Susan, but I swear like a sailor.
TFP, I try not to on air, but I do.
Yeah, I know. I do on air.
Knock yourself out. I bet you can outsource.
I might.
So TFP, these fucking people that they put in charge, the Starmers and the Macrons and the von der Satans and all the rest of it, like all these people are really third tier. Like these are all people that were handed power, and they walk around. And being a New Yorker, they walk around standing on third base, thinking that they were born on third base, thinking they hit a triple, and that's not the way the world works. So, and they're very easy to manipulate, and they're very easy to figure out because every day is opposite day.
Yeah,
right. Every day is opposite day in Trump's new America. This is what I've been saying for I don't know, a year now, and because of that. They're very easy to manipulate. And it's very easy to manipulate on a weekly media cycle, the way Trump does. What Trump does is masterful on a weekly basis. Starting on Thursday, he sets the tone for the next week. He lets them do their Emily's List thing on Sunday. They come up with some stupid thing talking points that he then dismantles by Tuesday. By Thursday, he's got the next talking point. He's moved 90 degrees and they don't know what to freaking do. And they're like, how did we lose this fight? I'm like,
yeah,
because you're dealing with Donald Trump and there's no sure. So
and you got. I mean, since I've been out talking to the American people, there's these pockets of Trump derangement syndrome, obviously. But when you go, since I've been talking to people for over half a century, I can tell you how much the average American has shifted in terms of a grasp of reality, where this narrative just now bounces right off them. There have been waves of this. Obviously, something was going on that got Donald Trump elected in 2016. It scared the crap out of everybody. But then each wave of assault that they carried out on Trump, whether it was Russiagate, whether it was COVID, whether it was J6, whether it was the indictments, it didn't matter. Every time they've escalated, more people wake up.
Yeah.
So, people may, you may have a bunch of cousins. I have a bunch of old friends and family members and so on where, I just don't bother. I mean, maybe someday they'll wake up, maybe they won't. But there's so many other people who are waking up. Let's focus on them.
No, I agree completely. Like and it's even for me, for me, Donald Trump's election was downstream of the day that Ron Paul lit the foreign policy world on fire in 2008 when he went after Rudy Giuliani about blowback in Iran and the global war on terror and all the rest of it. And then you could just see it building from there. I was deeply involved in that movement at that point in time, but I was always with the idea of we have to get out from underneath this insane system. I didn't understand the system at that time the way I think I do now. I always preface to say, I think I understand the system. I do not understand anything. None of us do, because it's way too complicated. When a guy like Zoltan Pozar, has a map of the Eurodollar system on his wall, and it's a PDF that looks like a Mandelbrot, where you just, the deeper you go, the more you uncover. Like it's, and then, he turns to someone like Danielle DiMartino Booth and says, and this is only 25% of it. Oh, by the way, like there's a great story in her book, Fed Up, where she describes that meeting and like, so whatever we think we understand about how the system actually operates at the at the interpersonal level, at the individual trader's desk level or whatever, it's very fungible data. But at the 30 to 40,000 foot level, when we can sit down as commentators and explain it such that most people can get it, which is our goal as communicators, then it becomes a much easier task. And you say, well, what about this detail and that detail? Like, don't get involved in that unless you're willing to spend your entire life doing it. Like, which is unfortunately what I've done. Just you understand that this is the way the world actually works, and you can always tell why with the heuristic of if they're coming after somebody for doing X, Y, and Z that threatens that system. That's when you know that the person who they're attacking is the guy you should be backing. Like, the first rule of politics is you know a man by his enemies.
Yeah.
Well,
and the two men, and the two men who have more enemies than Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in the world.
I'll tell you a funny story. When I was at the last Michigan Republican convention, where I was running for one of the vice chair positions, I was working one of the registration lines, talking to delegates. Hi, I'm Susan Kokinda. I'm running for Coalition's vice chair. And all of a sudden, some guy who I later find out is a stringer for the Financial Times and happens to be a delegate from northern Michigan, starts screaming, "You're LaRouche, you're anti-Semitic, you're Nazis, you should be thrown out of there." And everybody in the line looked at me and said, well, that sounds pretty good, because that's how they attacked Donald Trump. And this guy was completely ignored.
Well, no, seriously. And then the funny part about that, you're not lying. Like, I'm at the point now where I was chatting with a friend of mine the other day who's, who doesn't go public on any of this stuff, but he's like they don't have any idea what's going on with the Gen X boys in this, the Gen Z boys in this country. They're all like, Hitler didn't go far enough, which is a dangerous overcorrection, mind you. But it tells you where the mood is, and our job, and that's another job of us as commentators, is to rein this back into, let's not get into false scapegoats, because the one thing the British are really good at is giving the world chum and then giving them a scapegoat so they can continue to do what they've always been doing. And that's, I did a space the other day with my friend Halsey English, who runs a space, a regular space from the Jewish perspective, and I had myself and Ian Burlingame were on there, and we, interjected a rational, sane framework for how they have to deal with the fact that they can feel it. They're staring into the pogrom. Right. And it's against regular Jews, and it's not against Zionist Jews. It's against regular, everyday. Doesn't matter who you are, and that's a very dangerous thing, and that's very typical. It's what they did to the Ukrainians to get them radicalized to go attack Russia. It's what they're trying to do to Canadians now. It's what they're trying to do, and certainly what they're trying to do to Californians. Mm-hmm. Over redistricting. It's the same divide and rule play. Narcissistic abusers. This is the model. So never forget.
We are going to come to the redistricting. The media, all they've been talking about is Ukraine, Russia, and how Trump is going to sell out to Russia and give evil Putin everything he wants and backstab the Ukrainians and the Europeans and everything. What they're not talking about is what else Trump and Putin are going to be talking about. Mm-hmm. That's telling. And I'd be interested in your commentary on that. What else are they going to cover?
I think Susan should go first.
Well, I think they're going to be talking about economic deals. I think they're going to be talking about other. I mean, you mentioned Israel. You're not going to resolve that crisis internal to the Mideast it's been fostered deliberately so to do that. You're going to need strong outside intervention. And I think Donald Trump has rapidly learned he can't do it alone. He would like to, but many people don't recognize how much influence Russia and Putin have in Israel, with a large Russian population there. He stays in contact with Netanyahu, because he knows that the only way you're going to rein this in is through these kinds of discussions. So whether you're talking about Iran, whether you're talking about Israel, other things, I think there's a whole plate of foreign policy issues where if the United States and Russia have at least a common plan, you can begin to box the lunatics in. And then there's going to be the question of economic deals. And of course, our organization has long been an advocate of the old proposal for a Bering Straits tunnel,
Sure.
which would link North America with Russia and Asia by implications. Who knows? They did pick Alaska to do this.
Obviously, no, this is so obvious. It's not just that. It's this is in effect saying, look, remember, why do we own Alaska? It's because at the end of the Crimean War, the Tsar was worried about Alaska falling into British hands, so they sold it to the United States. Because the last thing they wanted is for Canada to own and then make it right, and they would own all of that. So now the symbology of Alaska cannot be overstated. It's not just it's the place for them to. It is the right place for them to meet. It's also a thumb in the nose to the Biden junta, who summoned China there 4 days after they came into power, and we watched Antony Blinken, who's now been barred from all federal buildings. Oh, by the way. That hit this morning. Not only has he had a security clearance revoked, but he's now barred from all federal buildings, flat out. No, really, sorry, you don't get to converse and work with the minions, on taxpayer time. He dressed the Chinese down and literally tried to set back U.S.-Chinese relations, 150 years, with the standard neocon line. We knew exactly what. From that meeting, we knew exactly what was going on for the next 4 years under the Biden junta. So, it's very clear that that's what this is about. I can even almost make the argument that part of the reason why Trump and Elon had their little flame out was in order to free Elon's time up and get him out of government, which is where he's not really designed as a person to be, and to go, start setting the plans in motion for, some form of tunnel system across the Bering Strait, because that has to happen. Like Russia's doubling or tripling the capacity of the ESPO pipeline out to Kosmino in order to be able to, do the coffee and cake run of oil deliveries to China outside of the purview of the Suez Canal. This is very important stuff.
Kosmino, whereabouts is Kosmino? I don't have.
It's on the southern tip of the Kamchatka Peninsula. Kosmino is right there. It can easily supply. Yeah, it was like 400,000 or 500,000 miles. I wrote about this a year and a half ago. It's very obvious that the Russians are pushing the ESPO pipeline. They can push it out to about 1.5 million barrels a day, I believe, if they want to put another train in. So you're talking about being able to supply like a lot of China's needs, a lot of Korea's needs, a lot of everybody's needs, and if that's all there, and we have, a rail system bringing, and you're going to open up Alaska and you're going to open up Anwar, like, I wonder where that oil is going to go. Mm-hmm. And look, this is what's happening. And so why do you, again, I mean, this meeting is incredibly important. I think Ukraine is a sideshow to the whole thing, to be honest with you. I think they're going to talk about Ukraine for about half an hour. And the rest of it is going to be, how do we carve up the world? And how do we figure out how to message this thing? And what do we have to do to basically disarm that entire kind of slice of the planet from north to south, from like St. Petersburg through Ukraine, take a slice out of the planet. Eastern Africa, Gibraltar, all of that, and the Suez and all of it. That's all one big conflict zone. And it has to be demilitarized. And there's only one way to demilitarize it. Blow up all the weapons and kill all the men. This is what's happened. We already had that in the 12-day war between Israel and Iran. Hear me out here, Rich. I know you're like looking at me like I got four heads. You have to disarm.
I'm always willing to listen to you, right? I just don't.
No, I know. You have to. In order to stop World War III, you have to preclude it from ever being able to be fought. How do you do that? You get rid of the stockpiles of weapons in low-grade skirmishes. The Imperial game is right about this. This is how you bleed this out. So the master stroke in Israel and Iran, the 12-day war, was allowing Israel to come in and blow up a bunch of Iran stuff, and Iran has shooting a whole bunch of missiles over, and everybody shot their wad, and all the stockpiles are gone, and everybody's ability to reload is now a couple of years off. Okay, so while the conflict isn't over, the potential for it to do anything other than go nuclear, which is not going to happen, is because neither Putin nor Trump want Israel lobbing nukes at anybody because Trump's already basically told them that now. If you do this, you get no more help. Well, the same thing's got to happen in Ukraine. They built 6 Ukrainian armies, and it's got to be bled out. If the Europeans want to dump 250,000 NATO troops in without with nothing more than the most basic U.S. air cover to defend what's left of Ukraine's position east of Dnieper, well, okay, but that's it. But it's going to be a meat grinder, and it's going to be for European troops, not American troops. And it's going to be fought with American weapons that they bought, and they're going to pay us back for all the money they stole. Yeah. These TFPs. Yeah. Like, that's the way this is. You have to realize that that's the way Trump is running foreign policy right now. And I really think that that's part of what's going on. And from Putin's perspective, and if you notice how everybody talks about how Trump keeps quoting all the ridiculous British, kill ratios about how many Russians have died. He does it on purpose, because what he's trying to do is set the narrative. Now that I think about it, set the narrative that both sides have beaten the hell out of each other and nobody wants any more war. Sorry, unfortunately, the Russian military is actually in a stronger position it is today than it was before. But now the civilian economy needs to, now that Russia needs to transform itself into a civilian economy. And you do that by ending the threat from Europe. I don't know if we get out of that without at least, a 3 to 4 month, campaign of slaughter, one last round of slaughter in Ukraine. But I think that's I think that's what both men are trying to avoid. But, then again, our European partners, as Putin would put it, have other plans.
Have a different picture. Yeah, and the other thing in terms of the significance of this and a Bering Straits tunnel, and you look at the world from the North Pole as opposed to looking at the world the way the British want us to look at it, where they control the choke points. They control the ocean choke points like the Suez and, the Panama Canal and so on and so forth. But, and we're so used to looking at the world in this, from this standpoint, basically, of the United States and Europe and the equator, and, Russia's way over there and China's way over. Look at it from the North Pole. We're right next to them, and if you actually start to develop, a new kind of economic cooperation, land-based, not sea-based, right, where the imperial system doesn't have the choke points in the oceans. That's why they hated the Transcontinental Railroad and the Trans-Siberian Railroad. They don't want development inside countries and continents because they can't control it like they can control the oceans. So the potential implications of what's going on in Alaska, and we may not see all of it or even most of it for some time, but this is potentially transformative in terms of literally laying the basis, not just for being against the Anglo-Dutch imperial system, but actually putting together the combination of forces which can actually shut it down.
Agreed. And this is part of the reason why I kept bringing up the redistricting thing, because you have to start looking at the United States and where their strongholds are. I did a map the other day for my patrons for the market report that I do on Wednesdays and Sundays. On Wednesday, I said, look at where the pockets of resistance are in the United States, where clearly we're watching them spin up civil war, secessionist states' rights rhetoric over redistricting. It's no different than 1857 through 1860, what they did in the South to gin up, Southern secession movements in the South. Why? Look at what they want. They want Eastern Canada, so control the Great Lakes. They have democratic, chaotic strongholds in Illinois, everything that rings, all the states that ring the Great Lakes, Minnesota, where they put IQ 60 Somalis. And why do you think Tim Walz was Kamala Harris's running mate? You think that was just random? No, that guy's a moron. No, it's because he represents Minnesota. That was a tell. Same thing in all across the Great Lakes, the Northeast, which is where all the developed ports are, and then the left coast from Vancouver down to San Diego. So again, Susan just mentioned, they think the Anglo-Dutch Empire thinks in terms of naval power and shipping, because that's what they can control. So they want to take all that away from the United States. So if Western Canada secedes from Canada and we get the great, land bridge from Alaska to the lower 48. Their counter is to try and force the Northeast and the left coast to secede and leave us quote unquote landlocked in the middle, mostly because the southern ports aren't nearly as one developed or as too capable. It's interesting that Ron DeSantis has been so adamant about building up the port of Miami post COVID, right? So this is what's going on here, and this is very important that they're going to play that game, and it's a dual pronged attack over redistricting, because not only are they attacking the American economic resurgence that way, but they also then, if they push for that kind of secession, now they're attacking the U.S. bond markets as well, because now the economic engines of the left coast and the Northeast can walk away, and then how does the world, decide to value $37 trillion worth of U.S. denominated debt when those guys are going to say, "No, we left. It's all your problem now," and that's the game they're playing. And the minute I realized, when Rich and you and I have been talking about this stuff for 5 years, but the minute I realized that that their goal was to attack our bond market by getting us involved in a war we can't fight with an enemy that we shouldn't be fighting against, i.e. Russia, I'm like, oh, right, obviously. And so this is why they did what they did during the Biden hunter. This is why they went on this incredible spending spree and all of this fraud and everything else. It was done on purpose to leave us in a perilous state that all they had to do was, knock over one little domino and the whole thing would collapse. That was their plan. And it has failed miserably up to this point, but it's still a threat on the table because they left us with a 3-seat majority in the House. And now Gavin Newsom wants to redistrict, call for an election in November, and then add 5 seats, and then take over, put Hakeem Jeffries in place, and blah, 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 blah. Good news about that is that for that press conference, you got 106 people to show up, more than half of whom were freaking media. Last I checked, I can get 106 people to show up to Sonny's in Claremont, Florida for ribs.
Yeah, right.
I can get 106 people for a birthday party easily. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Without media.
Yeah.
And we have a pretty courageous organization out in California. They're not that. I mean, they don't think Newsom has got this in the bag at all in terms of being able to push this through. And of course, California is kind of like the rest of the United States. You've got blue strongholds. And the rest of the state is for Trump. And in one of those blue strongholds in Oakland, California, is our organization, believe it or not. And one of our members, Mindy Petchnick, ran for mayor of Oakland as an open Trump supporter. Came in like 4 out of 7 or something in their ranked choice voting nonsense. And she's running again. And there's a resonance in this population to sanity. One of the things they're resonating the most strongly with is Trump's executive order on treatment first for drug addiction, which of course has not been the policy of the social controllers. The social controllers say you have a right to be mentally ill, you have a right to, be a drug addict and live in the street, and now we're going to try and ameliorate it by giving you housing. The Trump administration has reversed this and said, no, we have to treat these people. This is not and we are getting a very strong resonance in the Black population in Oakland and the other minority populations. So, when you actually get out there at the granular level on the issues that affect people's lives, the spin masters may think they have it in the bag, but not when you're dealing with the fact that, somebody's kid died of fentanyl or somebody's grandmother is living in a shopping cart in an alley and they know that it's wrong and no one has ever stood up to do anything about it. So I think we could break their grip in these in these little blue enclaves that they have left.
I hope so. In California, the problem is that they've gone so far to ensure that they can basically write whatever election result they want legally through ballot harvesting, this, that, and everything else. I don't know. It is a real threat. I just think that if he attempts to do this, that I'll be honest with you, I can see him just moving in. I can see him moving in the military and taking Sacramento over. He's being forced into a Lincoln style move that makes him look like a dictator for 2026 for the 2026 midterms. These are the chess moves that I see on the board, and I don't know. I mean, I'm just thinking like them. Like I'm thinking that he does this, we're going to do that. We're going to escalate again. Who's in control of the escalatory ladder? We've been talking about it in Ukraine for forever and a day. Now let's start talking about the escalatory ladder in California and Canada, because look at what they're doing in Canada. It's the same problem. I watched a short video the other day of a guy who was trying to work and negotiate with the Canadians. He's like, look, we are the ones on the American side. Mark Carney's lying through his teeth. The Canadians are lying through their teeth. We're the ones trying to protect the USMCA, the existing trade deal that Trump put together back in his first term. They're the ones saying, well, if we'll buy Canadian first, as if we're not going to tariff any of the goods that are there that are exempted under that trade deal. And the Canadians are like, well, no, we're going to source it from China first, and if we can't find it from China, then we'll go from here first, and then if there's nowhere else, then we'll finally try talk to buy American goods. Canada has become a hostile territory on our northern border. They are a hostile country. This is the War of 1812 writ large. The Laurentian elites east of Sault Ste. Marie are their fucking problem. It's not acceptable in any way as Americans for these people to be acting this way. None. And so this is an entire area of North America that was settled by people who were butthurt about losing the Revolutionary War in the first place, and they left. And they set up the antipode. The British always do this. America, anti-America. Canada, India, anti-India. Pakistan, North, South Korea. Russia, Ukraine. Split the herds up into 5 different countries. All the rest of it. Ireland, Northern Ireland. Yes, keep going. Little England, Scotland. It's the same. It's the Midlands versus Scotland. Like it's awful, and this stuff needs to end. And I look around the world today. I mean, I look at Trump kind of ending the Nagorno-Karabakh between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and all I've seen from the kind of typical anti-American alternative geopolitical quote unquote, I don't know whether you call them left or right, this commentariat. And these people are my friends, right? These are the people that I've been talking to for the last 7 years. And I'm like listening to them all go, oh, the Americans are coming in to extend the empire and hurt Russia. I'm like, no, they're kicking the fucking British out. They're taking control of the energy corridor coming from the Caspian, and they're putting pressure on the Turks, who are now playing footsie again with the EU. That's what's going on. Okay. That was on the to-do list between. I firmly believe that Trump and Putin each have mutual to-do lists. Like you knock one off, I'll knock one off, and go back and forth. And they've been knocking stuff off the to-do lists, like left and right. Every once in a while, they get a little angry at each other because they're not happy with the way the other guy knocked the thing off the to-do list. But that's not a big deal. That's all part of a negotiated settlement.
That's how mob bosses work, right? Yeah, they don't sort of packs, right?
At some point, what will happen is Trump and Putin will look at each other going, I wasn't really crazy about how you attacked Kiev the other day. I wasn't really crazy about how you ended things in Azerbaijan. So when we buy the Nord Stream pipeline, I want 27% of the revenue as opposed to 25.
Yeah,
Deal.
Right.
Done. Okay, we move on.
And just on Canada, right, is and this occurred to me the other day, and credit to both of you that I even begin to start thinking this way. There is no clearer signal that Trump is up against the City of London when the City of London installs their lackey, Bank of England former governor, not a politician, as the Prime Minister of Canada.
And the only non-British born person in history to serve as a governor of the Bank of England.
Yes.
Yeah. How clearer can it be? Now, Tom, is there anything else you want to say about redistricting, or anything you want to say about that, Susan? Because I want to move on to what Trump is doing in Washington as one of the holy trinity of the Vatican.
Well, it's all part of the same. It's all part of the same fight, Rich. There's no way in hell that he was going to go to Alaska to meet Putin and leave DC under control of whoever the freaking mayor is over there, Marion Bowers. Like no way, no way. Not when they spun up some brown shirts, all puns intended, on Sunday night to go start beating up white people and start beating up white people. And he's like, that's enough. No, sorry, we're taking the whole place over. Because it was clear that if he's going to be out of town and most of the brain trust is going to be out of town, well, what would you do? If you don't feel comfortable in your own capital, then you have to put the military on the ground and you have to start cleaning up DC. And then so him federalizing DC is a massive, massive move. And I've never really been much of a subscriber to the whole revolution of 1871 thing, but it's kind of hard to argue with now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's fine. So we'll just leave it there. Susan, you can take it from here.
No, I mean, I think that's, this whole revolution of 1871 thing is a typical rabbit hole where people think that you're going to win this fight through legalisms, or that the British Empire fights through legalisms and so on and so forth. But I think the question of the cities is absolutely critical, because that is their last stronghold. And, figuring, and that's where I think the message, one of the, as you know, our almost fanatic fixation is on Trump's economic policies and the return to the American system and how this is going to begin to affect. Right now, what we're doing is just trying to say to people, this is what he's doing, and you're going to feel it soon. And I think I think there is some level of that. We had the biggest jump in blue collar wages in 60 years back in June, which is, fundamental.
Right.
But I think as people begin to feel, the impact of some of Trump's policies in terms of their actual lives, the fact that there's a little more stability, the fact that they have a little more money in their pocket, the fact that maybe their kid can actually go to work in a machine tool shop. I don't know if I told the story here when I talked to you last time, Rich, but I was speaking someplace and I was talking about Trump's manufacturing revolution. And one of the first things that comes up is people say, well, where are you going to get the skilled workforce? Because we don't have one. We've dumbed down our population. And I point out that Trump is pushing an expansion of some small scale projects where you can go in and you can get a welder's license or a CNC license, computerized machine tool license, in a 17-week program. So a lady in the audience interrupts me. She says, well, I got to tell you, my grandson is in one of those programs. He used to be a marijuana chef. I didn't know that was a thing, but that's what they called them, right? And he called me, he's about halfway through the program, and he called me and he said, Grandma, I've never been happier in my whole life because now I can build things. So, right? If you change, the psychological warfare in terms of the potential for civil war, anything else that they're doing, it only operates in an environment of despair. That's when they can manipulate people. If people begin to see genuine hope for the future, they see their grandson is suddenly happy, or their granddaughter is not going to end up as a drugged out hooker on the streets of Oakland because there's a different policy. That's when it's going to be harder for them to pull the rest of this shit. Not that they're not going to die, but they're going to be much more isolated. And our like I say, fanatical focus is get out there and explain to people, this is not just Trump changing this policy here and changing this policy there. This is a full-on assault on a system which has been shoved down our throats with vengeance since August 15th, 1971. In my Wednesday show, I took an excerpt from JD's interview on Gateway Pundit, where he said, for 50 years, my whole life, things have been going downhill, and now somebody has actually got the courage to reverse it. You can never rule out, in the political equation, this critical subjective question, which is where we have real power. They may have the media, but when people are living in the real world and their lives are changing for the better, then they are much, much less susceptible. You probably know that from your work.
You're completely correct. And from the 30,000 foot view level, from the financial markets, I was saying for years, I'm like, the world wants America to come back and lead and stop acting like a drug addicted,
drug addicted, trans,
a nihilistic, idiot. Like they want us to lead, and all we have to do is show them that will start the process of fiscal restraint and this, that, and everything else, and the money will flow right in here because they know it's not that the rest of the world is hostile to it. The second part about that, if anybody thinks that Susan is not correct about this, I have one word for you: Russia. When Vladimir Putin took over in 2000, the numbers are stark. This is what changed my entire worldview when I started studying, Putin in Russia. And, I was first working for Newsmax in 2013. I got my first gig as a newsletter writer, and I was like, I just went to the Bureau of Statistics over in, the Russian Bureau of Statistics. I'm looking at, abortions as percentage of live births dropped by 95%, where abortion was the primary means of birth control. By the time, under the end of the Soviet Union in the Yeltsin years, that's over. That's due to alcoholism. Dropped by 90%. All the numbers are insane. Like the turnaround and the numbers that I've seen some memes recently, people describing Putin when he took over, Russia when Putin took over Russia today. I'm like, those numbers are great. They were nearly that good 10 years ago. And so you wonder why Putin has been able to be the antipode the beginning of the turn of the antipode to this system. It's because he had the Russian people behind him because he brought them out of despair. And what did he do? He nationalized the industries that he needed to nationalize. He gave people jobs. He rebuilt the friggin' oil industry. And all the downstream effects of that. And he got people working. Yeah, is the Russian economy still, relatively speaking, relative to ours, the basket case in terms of credit creation and everything else? Of course, it is. But it's not hopeless. It's also at an inflection point where it needs to now make the turn to the next stage. And Trump is implementing right now the first stage of what Putin did. I look at what Trump is arguing for, minus like all the crypto stuff, which is just another way of getting around the central bank. And I look at just the general flow of it all, and I'm like, well, it's obvious that they talk on the phone every 2 weeks. Like, I'm like looking at it going, no, that's how Putin did it. Trump is doing the same thing here. It's almost like Putin listened to a whole bunch of like Trump interviews from the 90s, for Christ's sake, and then decided to implement the shit in Russia in the 2000s. And then now Trump is now doing what Putin was going to do. And then I watch every attempted color revolution flare up this summer. LA, New York, this, that, and everything else. And Trump is just like on it like white on rice. He understands. Again, it's almost like they talk on the phone every 2 weeks. Oh, by the way, Vlad, how do I deal with all these traders? You put them down and you act quickly. You do not let it fester and don't let the media set the narrative for you. They start shit in LA, fine. Actually, provoke shit for them to start in LA and then put them down. Do the ICE raids, have them, predictably, they're going to come in, they're going to try and stir shit up. What do? You immediately nationalize the California Guard, send in the Marines, and end the whole thing before it can get out of control. Again, how do you stop a civil war from starting? By containing it to a brush fire. And then you bleed those people out, and then you arrest them all, and you bleed their money out. Same thing they're doing in DC, Chicago, New York, Israel and Iran, Russia, Ukraine. It's the same strategy over and over again. The British have no power. They have no military power. They have only the ability to do terrorist activities around the world through MI6, GCHQ, and Five Eyes. That's it. French intelligence, same thing. Mossad, same thing. It's all extension of the same friggin' system. That's all they have. They don't have the ability to fight wars. That's what we're supposed to do. I always said that these people see us as the help. The Eastern Europeans get to be their janitors and their whores. The Americans get to be their gendarme, and and the British get to be, and the English get to be their scapegoats. Like, that's what they've done.
Okay, now
it's over.
One thing to acknowledge is the agreement that there is between, I suppose, all three of us, right? But you two, because you're the guest, you're the ones we're learning from, right? But there is an area of disagreement between you both with regards to Trump's relationship with Jay Powell and the Federal Reserve. So, it seems that way. So, Susan, do you want to spell out your perspective?
Sure.
Well, I don't know what our disagreement is. I think Trump wants him out. I think what Trump has been doing is really important in the sense of actually drawing into the public square a discussion about the nature of the Federal Reserve. Which we have not had. I mean, you've had it on the fringes. We've talked about it. Ron Paul talked about it. You've had a certain small sector of the population has been fairly literate on this question and the Fed movements and so on and so forth. But your general population, thinks it's a federal institution. It's been there forever. You need it, blah, 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 blah. And what Trump has done by picking this fight with Jay Powell on the question of interest rates, on the question of the Taj Mahal on the mall, and these things and it's not just Trump, obviously, it's his entire cabinet, has jumped in. So it's clearly intended to do this, it's actually drawing the American population into a discussion of an institution which has been hiding in the shadows for almost 100 years, so that more people than Tom and I are sitting there saying, well, wait a minute, what is this thing? Should it be run better? Should we have it at all? I mean, Besant's statement on, I think it was a CNBC show, we have to call into question the very institution itself. Is it fulfilling its mission? Well, if its mission is to strangle the United States on behalf of the central bankers, the answer is yes. But that's not what most people think its mission is. So I think they've initiated a kind of long process. People are always saying, why doesn't Trump just end the Fed tomorrow? Well, please explain to me how he's going to do that with this Congress. Obviously.
Yeah, or the financial system as it's currently constituted.
Yeah.
No. I just want to make sure, because I watch a lot of the videos that you and Barbara point out, and I have to and I cringe a little bit because in my world, like, Jerome Powell is a hero for how he destroyed the Eurodollar system post COVID. And yeah, was he a little late to the party? Yeah, should he have reined the inflation in earlier? Probably, but he did, starting in June 2021 when he started draining the Eurodollar system by moving the global M0 into the reverse repo facility, by a very simple move of moving 5 basis, by paying the banks an extra 5 basis points to do that. It's a very long, I don't know whether you ever heard my argument about this, Susan, or not. I don't know. But my point is that it started there. Biden fought his reconfirmation in a way that we've never seen before, like the Fed chair's reconfirmation. I mean, it's actually interesting now that I think about it. The insider trading scandal at the Fed in November 2021, that was initiated by Miss MMT herself, Lael Brainerd, who signed off on all of those trades, by the way, because she was a compliance officer. Like I spent 4 years covering this, like in grave detail. Powell raising interest rates the way he did and prosecuting monetary policy the way he did post-COVID to shrink the Fed's balance sheet and to drain the offshore dollar system was to drain the leverage out of it, to set the table for when Trump could come to power and change the entire system. By removing us from LIBOR, moving us off of LIBOR, where City of London was setting the cost of offshore of the dollar around the world, to SOFR, which is an American secured overnight financing rate. What he did was he put the American economy and the American demand for dollars central to the price of dollars worldwide, and that would then help set the interest rate environment. Powell, as a person, he's a little slow. He's a little, but he's doing this on purpose. I think he's doing it on purpose, not cutting interest rates. And it's not because he's trying to help City of London. I don't think that's the case at all. You go watch any time that he sits down with Christine Lagarde, and it's like daggers. Like, she tries to smooze him, and he's just like, yeah, no, I have a dual. He hides behind the dual mandate better than any friggin' Fed chair I've ever seen. And I mean, he does, and like he uses it every day of the week. If he wanted Kamala, this is why I get angry with Trump, because I know he's lying. When Trump says shit like, Powell cut interest rates to try and get Kamala Harris to win, I'm like, if you wanted Kamala Harris to win the presidency, you start cutting in March. Yeah, we would have been at 3% by November, and the economy would have been, on a sugar high, and it would have been a much different deal. No, he held off even in July when the markets were screaming at him to cut interest rates because there were credit stress that was really beginning to occur in the credit markets in the U.S., and he held off until September, and then he cut by 50 basis points in September, November, and December. Cut a point off, and then it was going to watch how things run. When you're still managing the global economy, even if in my mind, even if I posit that Powell's job was to set the stage for this. He doesn't want to manage the global economy anymore as Fed chair. He never has, but he's also not built to be the guy to carry the Fed through what comes next, which is exactly what Susan talked about. Okay, so his job is to tear everything down, is to tear the old system down by draining it of its vitality, so that when Trump comes in with tariffs and this and that and everything else that he's doing, and changing the focus and the flow of capital back to the U.S. in a substantive way, and raising the purchasing power of the dollar internally, what he's doing, and then what Powell says is, you know what, I'm going to be kind of order cop. Trump gets to be chaos cop, and I'm going to be the steady hand at the tiller that keeps the financial markets from around the world from going, the old playbook still holds. Powell's going to cut rates. He's probably, in my mind, I think he's going to cut rates 50 basis points in September. He will probably set policy at Jackson Hole. He'll start the process of cutting it in September, and he'll probably do exactly what he did last year: 50 in September, 25 in November, 25 in December, and then he may even exit the scene early if Congress and the Senate, here's the thing, and Susan, you touched on a point that I made previously in all of this, which I appreciate, which is, with this Congress, if he wanted to put somebody like Judy Shelton in as FOMC chair, how is he going to do that with Mitch McConnell still in the Senate? Right. He's not. It's going to be hard enough for him to get Stephen Mirren on the FOMC board. Okay, these people are important. These little moves that mean nothing to the rest of the world, but to the people who follow this shit on a daily basis, understand that this is the meat of the matter. This is how you change things, because the aftermath of that insider trading scandal was that Powell lost 3 of his best lieutenants: Kaplan, Creed, and Rosengren. who were, not MMTers. They got crushed and they were replaced with outright communists. Go look at those people that Biden replaced them with. So now Trump gets to put one person back on the FOMC board, and then he wants to put in a Fed chair that's going to do what he wants. And like putting Janet Yellen back at the Fed, oh my God, that would be the worst thing imaginable because she works for the bad guys. And but I think that's just Trump like playing games. So you've got to get somebody, you've got to set the table politically to go off the board. And you have to start 6 months early. To your point, Susan, Donald Trump is an 80-20 kind of guy. He takes an issue that 80% of the population agrees with, he champions that, and he ignores the 20% who hate him for it. Well, reforming the Fed is a 1090.
Yeah.
595. You got to move that needle from 1090 to 80-20. How do you do that?
That's right.
You got to turn Jay Powell into your scapegoat. And at the end of the day, Bessent, Trump, and Powell, they're all self-made men worth hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars each. These are men at the end of their careers. They didn't have to do what they're doing. So they're there in their jobs. Powell didn't need to do a second term. He could have walked away and just, gone back to his private. He didn't do that. He stayed to be everybody's whipping boy for 4 years and shepherd the full rollout of SOFR, which began in January 1st, 2022, to then fundamentally start changing the way we run things in the United States. And I'll be honest with you, my read on the situation is that what you have is a split on Wall Street. That the big G-SIB banks, you have some that are down with this, and you have with Trump's New America. Look at Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan, and you look at some of the others like BofA, Bank of America, Bank of New York Mellon, and a couple of others. Citigroup is kind of in the middle, and then the old European banks that are tied in. That split's very, very clear, and I think that is I think it's the map that when I started looking at it that way, all the data, like all the moves, like fell into place perfectly. And the only discordant note has been Trump doing the kayfabe thing with Powell. And Powell's a big boy. He's been around the block a couple of times. He knows how to take it. He knows how to take it from a guy like Trump. He doesn't care. He'll walk away. And I think what will wind up happening. Well, yeah, should close the fucking door, right?
Yeah, right.
It's the greatest line ever. But I think that what you're going to see is that Powell's going to leave the scene. Trump is going to ride him all the way out the door. And then about 18 months later, he's going to be invited to Mar-a-Lago, given a gold watch. They're going to have dinner. They're going to break bread. He's going to give him Trump's going to give Powell some forgive and forget noogies, and they're going to walk away. And all will be forgiven. That's what I think is on the table. But
Susan?
He is really angry at Powell because he does think that Powell needs to cut rates, but Powell's not going to do so. I mean, look, think about what happened. Once he started going after Powell, the BLS started juicing the employment numbers, and then reversing all the juicing of the employment numbers, which Powell uses as an excuse not to cut rates last year. Right. And so now Trump gets the twofer. It's like Powell doesn't cut rates because and now they're cutting rates, and now he gets to get rid of the head of the BLS because Powell didn't cut rates. I don't know. I'm thinking to myself, this just looks like WWE to me. You know what I mean? So this does. Like, Susan, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anything you want to say?
Well, no, I think I'm not, I am not into the insides of Federal Reserve policy like Tom is. I've got other people in my organization. I think actually would love to have a discussion with you, Tom, in terms of some of your insights in terms of that. I look at it, as Tom said, from the standpoint of how is Trump trying to politically maneuver? Because it is the case. You now at least have more of a discussion going on in the Fed, but this is not a one-term prospect to reform the Fed, remove the Fed, replace the Fed, nothing of the sort.
End run the Fed is as much as what I think is coming. Is that they're going to end run the Fed completely? Yeah,
and I've used the term dual power. They're not going to strip the Fed of its power. Obviously, Trump wants to have somebody who's going to, be in sync with his program and so on and so forth. But, look at everything else that Trump has done. I mean, proposing a sovereign wealth fund. I don't know where that discussion has gone since they promulgated that executive order. The different institutions inside the U.S. government that can be development institutions that can issue credit. Because the critical question really is, the Federal Reserve is not constituted as an instrument of credit policy for production. It's constituted as an institution which manages monetary policy for whomever you're managing it for.
Hmm.
You can look at Mariner Eccles at the Fed during, the Roosevelt period, during the Great Depression. He was basically working with Roosevelt, using the discount window of the Fed to actually get credit out into the real economy and so on. But at the same time, Roosevelt had the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which was a critical institution where with a snap of a finger, you got the money where you needed to go, where it needed to go. As we spun up the World War II mobilization, when Roosevelt brought in one of his political enemies, the former head of the CEO of GM, Bill Knudsen, who walked away from a lucrative job and became the first $1 a year man. He didn't take a salary, but he loved this country, and he said, "My president's called me, I'm doing it." He couldn't have gotten the credit he needed to start spinning up the machine tool production in this country. He was brought in a year before Pearl Harbor. They were getting they were getting appropriations from the Congress, and the congressman would say, "We've given you all this money. Where's the tanks? Where's the planes? Where's the this?" And Knudsen would patiently explain, it takes a year to spin up your machine tool capability so you can start building these things. He couldn't have done it without the RFC.
Right.
His closest ally was Jesse Jones at the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. So I think Trump has got a whole lot of this stuff going on. And then, of course, there's all of his signing bonuses he's getting from Japan and South Korea with the trade.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
And the European Union, the best one was the European
The
Union.
best one was the European Union. Yeah, okay, we won't screw you as much as we could.
Yes.
You're going to give us, if you give us a signing bonus and you invest. So he's looking, for all my friends who want to end the Fed tomorrow morning, give it a break. Trump is trying to figure out, how do we get money into the productive economy fast? Somebody wants to start building a factory. First of all, they're getting 100% full expensing, where they get to take the full amount off their taxes in the first year. So he's basically saying to these manufacturing companies overseas, not only am I going to penalize you if you stay over there, I am going to, I'm going to help you if you come here to the United States, and I'm going to give you incredible tax breaks. We're going to figure out how you're going to get the credit to do this and so on. So, this is the middle of, the first half of the 21st century. The world financial system is incredibly complicated. It's not what we had under Abraham Lincoln. It's not what we had under Alexander Hamilton. So what does a modern day form of national banking, which is the American policy, look like? Honestly, I don't have a clue. But I suspect there's people like the Scott Bessents, the J.D. Vances, people who are immersed in this world are thinking about that while they set up this dual power situation.
No, you're absolutely correct. I've been speaking to. When I started going down this path 4 years ago, I'm amazed at the people that come out of the woodwork talk to me about this stuff, and and the Twitter DMs that I get from people, or the random texts out of the blue that I get from people, and then the meetings that I wind up having with people. And it's not a lot, but it's enough, right? And I'm telling you, they know, they understand. We on my podcast, I bring the best people on to talk about where this is going. The podcasts that we've done recently, like the last 6 or 7, with Caitlin Long, Vince Lanchi, Brent Johnson, and others, we've all spitballed through how Trump is going to, in effect, bring free banking and free community banking back to the United States through and I'll be frank, the trio of crypto bills is where this is headed. And it's a way to end run the Fed. It's a way to end run whatever the BIS and everybody else is trying to do. I would absolutely recommend if you want to get into the geeky end of this, Susan. It's not just me that's talking about this stuff. I bring these people on because these are banking professionals. These are futures professionals. These people they know what they're talking about. These are the best minds in the space. And we've been having a back and forth conversation. For example, Caitlin Long and Vince Lanchi and I have been having a back and forth conversation about where this is heading for about 3 years now, and about what all this means. And coming from, even from, Caitlin's perspective, she's much more hostile to my ideas, but still sympathetic to them. And we spar. And Vince and I have just been just taken it to the, all the way out. And 3 years ago, we recognized that the United States was setting up to restrict physical gold flows around the world. And it was very subtle, but we could see it happening and what it meant. And that's a very big part of this. But the Fed, I think, is going to be reformed back to its Pre-Banking Act of 1935
Which
version, which I'll explain in just a second.
Well, I want to, because I'm conscious of the time, right? And I want to
Yeah,
move
yeah,
on to Azerbaijan and Armenia if you want to go there, but also Europe and, dear God, the United Kingdom. Oh my God. So my understanding that the Federal Reserve is actually a tool of the city of the Anglo-Dutch Empire. They set it up as a way of controlling US
Yes.
monetary policy. And so
Yes.
so getting rid of the Fed would be one in the eye for the British imperialists.
Yeah, it would be a reform of the Fed to be a primarily domestic institution that goes back again the pre-1935 Fed, the original conception of the Fed, even though it was always kind of destined to be turned into the Fed that it is today, where it was the guarantor of the commercial paper market, which is again, this is there are certain things in history that we are the innovators of. One, commercial paper. Right, as opposed to having to go, commercial paper is an American thing, right? Where corporate interests sell corporate debt. Like this is us. We came up with this. Like, Goldman Sachs famously is the one that started corporate paper. And the second thing is the 30-year mortgage, which we don't have time to get into today. But Susan, you and I are going to discuss in the future what Trump's plans are with Fannie and Freddie.
There you go, Susan.
This is a big one. This is a big
I
key
did note,
to his gig, to what he's trying to do.
Yeah, because I did notice.
The last thing is, and Rich, to answer your question, Fannie and Freddie are coming to save England. We don't have time for it today, folks. I'm going to leave it.
Next Friday, both of you and Alex.
Well, I have to save something for the subscribers. No, so serious. No, I mean, what I mean by this is that when Trump goes to bring Fannie and Freddie back onto he's going to, and this is public knowledge, he's going to bring them out of conservatorship. He's going to relist them, and he's going to use the government's 80% ownership in them as a piggy bank to help Scott Bessent move through our fiscal problem for the next 2 or 3 years. He's going to use that money, but but Fannie and Freddie are going to become fully privatized. They're going to be likely merged into one company with the great American mortgage company. Trump just put it out there the other freaking day. I couldn't believe he did it. And what's the other big American financial? I mean, there's many bad ones, but the next one that's important is the 30-year mortgage. The Fannie and Freddie as government-sponsored entities, which are effectively nothing more than pass-through entities to guarantee to repackage and help guarantee mortgages, so that we effectively socialize the home ownership of the entire country through the subsidization, but through the incentive structure of creating the 30-year mortgage and laying off those cash flows into the mortgage, into the insurance and reinsurance markets, is what built America. Okay, the free banking of the post-war era or the mid-19th century up until the Federal Reserve is what helped build the America that the British finally figured out we couldn't fight America anymore. We had to become their allies and then subvert them from within and give them the Fed to destroy them. The next iteration was the 30-year mortgage, which then created the engine of growth by freeing up a tremendous middle-class cash flow in order to build small businesses. We're going to take the 30-year mortgage around the world. The rest of the world doesn't use the 30-year mortgage like we do.
Okay.
Nobody else has the 30-year mortgage like we do. And I'm telling you, that's what's going to help when Fannie and Freddie go, and this is, again, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, when Fannie and Freddie go international, that's how we're going to fund and rebuild the places that are being right now destroyed on purpose by these fucking vandals who are trying to liquidate the UK, liquidate and destroy Canada, liquidate and destroy Australia and everywhere else that they control on purpose, so that there's nothing left for us to help rebuild. But the means by which to rebuild that is to open up the cash flow in all these places through the creation of and the offer of a 30-year mortgage, where now you're all on like 5s and 2s and 10s and all this other crap. Now you're on a 30, and the amount of cash flow that opens up, and the ability then for the small banks to issue local mortgages,
which Bessent has been stressing.
Okay.
Bingo, and it's all going to happen through through locally issued stable coins as well, where now the local and community banks are issuing dollars backed by U.S. Treasuries, gold, Bitcoin, and everything else, and not Federal Reserve notes. That's how you end the Fed.
Okay.
And then roll the Fed back into a guarantor of the lender of last resort in the commercial paper market.
Okay, Tom, I hope you're right. The only problem is Keir Starmer is not going to allow us to do that. He's not going to give us permission.
He's not going to be in power in 6 months, dude.
Come on. Listen,
Dude,
I
he's
don't think
not
he's
going to be in
make this
power
year.
in 6 months.
I don't think he's going to make this year. I just have a hunch. That's all. And I've said that he's not going to last
A
long.
hunch.
Awful.
It's like
Absolutely.
it's on the Gantt chart. It's on
I
Stephen
can't
Miller's
read the
Gantt
Gantt
chart.
chart the way you do, Tom. Right? It's like he's there.
Like you realize, Rich, that there are two opposing Gantt charts. There's the one at Evil Corp Central, otherwise known as the Anglo-Dutch Empire, and then there's the one that Stephen Miller has up in the White House, and they're fighting it out right now, like day to day. It's fucking amazing.
Okay. The only problem is that what we're likely to have is Nigel Farage, and I don't trust him. He's
He's City of London all the way through.
Yeah. So I don't know who we got. Susan, any commentary on the UK and Europe? How you see
look, I think all of this is again, this is one of these things where if you look at it from the bottom up, in many places it might look hopeless. But what Tom just said in terms of a potential scenario, in terms of Fannie and Freddie and the international situation, whether that is what is being discussed or not, but that's the way to look at it. You've got to operate from the standpoint of creating new centers of power, which are based on combinations of sovereign nations, not supranational institutions and central banks and so on, that begin to shift the entire global dynamic. And then it's within that, that some of these more intractable problems, like, living in the United Kingdom, places like that, can possibly begin to see a way through this. But it's, you're not going to be able to do it internal to the UK. And there's nothing that, frankly, anybody was going to do until you had a couple of world leaders like Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, who are committed to kicking over this entire hideous, Anglo-Dutch system, whatever terms they put it in. That's where the change is going to come from. And then you figure out your tactics, your flanks, your local situations from inside that. It's like, even in politics, you can't look at what's going on in your state or your congressional district in isolation from what is Trump doing nationally, what is happening internationally, how is the entire direction of the nation changing, and potentially the entire direction of the world. So, that's where your hope lies in my book.
I know. Susan's absolutely correct, and I mean, and this is why we focus the way we do on the large. If you solve the big problems this way, I've been saying forever, you've got to bankrupt these people. You've got to force them to put their stolen wealth on the table. And every time, like, what do I hear right now? It's like I hear the sound of a lot of people calling high-priced lawyers around DC and going to voicemail.
Yeah,
that's what I hear right now.
Yep.
That there ain't enough billable hours at a lot of these high-priced firms to cover the people who are now really, really, really worried. And Trump's not fucking around. And it's interesting to watch him do it. I didn't think he had it in him. I'll be honest. After the first season of the Trump Show, I didn't think he had it in him. But when he sent Elon Musk after Keir Starmer, during the transition, I'm like, really? Like, we're gonna have that conversation? No, it's gonna look like this time. Okay, let's play this game. This is gonna be fun. And then, he very, very succinctly, first thing he did was he shut off their flow of our money, our tax money, to go fund our destruction.
Right.
That's the first thing he did. Second thing he started doing was going after the dark money. And that's a much tougher fight because it's all over the world and it's decentralized. But again, it all flows through certain areas. Again, as far as I'm concerned, like tomorrow, if Donald Trump were to say, I'm invading Canada to take over the Canadian banks, I'd be like, okay, do you need some help? Like, I'm not much of a rifle shot, Don, but if you need me to, I can drive the Humvee back and forth, the half track back and forth to get supplies for the guys who are, I'm there, dude. Like, I'm on board, because that is nasty. Because Canadian banks are just as fucking rotten as the City of London banks. They're all City of London banks anyway. And that's where so much of the drug trade goes through. And that's why Mark Carney was installed in Canada, and it's to protect the international drug trade flowing through Canadian banks, without a doubt. And they're importing, and Canada is right now, the biggest threat for Canada is the policy of trying to double the Canadian population through mass immigration. And again, we mentioned at the beginning, Susan, India. India is the problem child, because the Chinese are clearly on board with this. They remember the Opium Wars. They're done with the Anglo-Dutch system. They're not too happy with the Americans, but they'll cut a deal because they're not stupid. Like you said, look at the world from the North Pole. I've been saying, look at the world centered on the Pacific Ocean. And you can see everything you need to see. And India is really not. India is the last outpost that I think they're trying to move into, and pull all of those threads on, all of those old relationships and all those old threads to try and keep India from joining the system as much as humanly possible. And Modi is not to be trusted at all, ever. I don't trust Narendra Modi at all. He will keep playing both sides against the middle, just like Erdogan in Turkey. And I don't know, he doesn't know when to stop, playing both sides. He's got to realize that the day is going to come when it's going to be when Trump and Putin are going to both put the screws to India. Is the only way that's going to end. Same thing with what they're doing to Erdogan in Turkey right now. We don't have time to go into that, but I have a whole argument as to where I think that's going and what happened in Syria and everything else. But that's a different discussion for a different day.
And that's also something Alex Crane has mentioned a couple of times when he's been on with me recently about what's happening in Turkey. So I'm interested in getting both of you on, because I think you're.
Oh yeah, we will. Alex and I are doing Sean Newman next week as well. So we'll be in really good form and well practiced by the time we do this again next week.
Very good, very good. Susan, Tom, anything you guys want to say before we finish up?
Nope, it's been fun.
Well, it's been great fun. It's been very good to meet you. And I say this to Rich all the time, that when there's somebody that I discover that I would like to talk to, I always like to do this kind of three-way first, under where there's a moderator in case things go south. No, I've had a great time today, and you are more than welcome to come. I'd love to have you on the Gold Guts and Guns podcast, and the two of us will go over it. Let's do that.
Susan, that is an acknowledgement, and also that he trusts you to be well behaved, because you've done well today.
I can usually control myself.
No, the biggest problem is that I just don't like hosting people on my podcast where I'm going to have a really contentious situation.
I get it.
I don't think that's good. I just don't think it's good content. No. I just don't. It's not good for anybody. So that's all.
Tom, Susan, thank you so much. I so appreciate this. Love to have you back on. You can hold on a few minutes after I stop recording. And everybody, please go check out the work of Promethean Action on YouTube and X and everything in their videos. I listen to each of their little videos 2 or 3 times. There's so much information on them. And of course, go check out Tom's work on Gold Guts and Guns and follow him on X. He's incredibly rude. He's really rude. Really. And I don't mean like bawdy or whatever. He's just insulting and rude and very entertaining.
Well, if we're not having fun, we're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And if we're not being honest, what's the point?
Okay, much appreciated.
Rich, I will leave you with this. Is my shocked face.
Yes. Please share, comment, do all that business. And I look forward to having you both on again. All the best. Bye-bye.
Yeah.